I'm Josh Schneiderweiler, coming up on Football Today.
It is all over, and Napoli's problems on and off the pitch continue. Real disappointment etched all over the faces of the Napoli players. It has finished Napoli 0, Genoa 0.
But this feels like a mutiny. It feels like a seminal moment in the season, and I don't know. It depends whether De Laurentiis can put his pride to one side, because you're not going to go and sack 30 players, are you?
Following Napoli's 0-0 draw with Genoa on November 9th, the club sit in 7th place in the Italian Serie A, and they haven't won in the league in over a month. However, off the field, the club look even worse. Players are fighting with management, and fans are fighting with players. Today, we unpack Napoli's civil war and see if there's any light at the end of the tunnel.
And the Stadio Olimpico hosting Roma and Napoli today. Two teams with just 1 point between them. Roma secure their third win in a week.
It was clear that Ancelotti was not happy with life in Naples. Things hadn't gone the way he had expected them to go.
Nima Tavalli covers Italian football for SempreInter.com and Goal.
You know, he's very un-Italian in the way that he's not very fiery in his personality, and he doesn't say so much in terms of passionate. He's a very cool and level-headed guy. But it was clear that he was more mellow than he usually was. He was very annoyed when what happened in the stadium, the renovations in the stadium, where they didn't have a dressing room, hadn't been finished. There was no showers, there was no running water. He was very annoyed with that, and you could just generally sense with the stuff coming out from him that he was not happy with life. I think it's very clear that he was promised a transfer window and a transfer market that allowed him to play in a different formation than that he wanted to play than he was playing last season. That he's reverted to now, a 4-4-2. I think it was clear that he wanted to play a 4-3-3, but he wasn't given the players he wanted that he expected. I think there was a number of things, and then he was getting more and more annoyed with how things were going, and so this is something that's been building up for a long time since the summer, and it kind of all it was like a perfect storm from then on. The Napoli, they lost to Roma, and then everything just completely falls apart at the seams.
Napoli's owner Aurelio De Laurentiis is a key character in this chaos. What is he like?
You have a president in Aurelio De Laurentiis who's a very special character. He wants to get involved. I mean, he has this kind of, the way he's acted in Napoli ever since taking over is that he is the dictator. He is the sun king. He does not like being contradicted. He does not like being questioned. He does not like his employees going against him publicly or privately. And anyone who has ever done that has been shown the door very unceremoniously. And for me, the fact that Ancelotti after that game came out and said that he was against this decision to have this training ground lockup in the Retiro, he was against it. And I knew that this was not going to be accepted or be taken that well by De Laurentiis. But no one could have expected what happened afterwards.
So just to go back to that game, what about that game ignited kind of the fallout that came after?
I wouldn't say it was anything in that game. It was just the fact that Napoli are as a whole haven't been performing the way that a team that was expected to challenge Juventus for the title this season were performing. They just weren't that top side that they expected themselves and everyone else expected.
This year and next year we'll have more chance to win something very important, either locally, either outside. But what will win, I don't know.
And I think the loss against Roma, who was depleted in terms of injuries, and they lost that game rather convincingly. I think the 2-1 scoreline is rather is actually rather flattering to Napoli, because Roma completely dominated that game.
So after the game, what happened?
Well, Aurelio De Laurentiis said that, going into the Champions League game where they could have secured a qualification to the second round of the Champions League, he wanted to have a retiro.
The team will be on retiro until Sunday morning, when some of them will respond to call-ups from the national teams.
To where they would spend the entire week in the training complex, in the training ground, focusing on the team building and focusing on winning the next game. This is a kind of draconian measure that you in Italy that you use when things are really bad, or when you're going into, usually that's the kind of thing that a coach uses when there's a crisis. Some coaches use it when you're playing a final or a huge game to kind of, get the team to come together and focus on the job at hand. This is kind of like the in emergency break glass type of measure that clubs use. And it's never called publicly like this by the club's president. It's usually the sporting director and the coach that do this. And you have to remember, these people, the players are people. They all have wives, they all have friends, they all have children, and they're not allowed to see them for 7 days. And it can come at a moment's notice. And De Laurentiis, without talking to anyone else, just went out and called one.
And what was the response?
Well, the response was that Carlo Ancelotti said that he thought it was wrong.
No, non sono d'accordo sulla decisione.
He thought it was a mistake, but we have to accept it. And that's a really, really, if you know Italy and you know how to read the signs, that's a big statement, a very bold statement. In Italy, many times, often, you don't go against the padrone. You don't go, especially if you have an ownership like De Laurentiis. Although his business module is very modern in terms of for Italian standards, his way of running the club is very archaic. He is the padrone, he's the president, he's the boss, and no one goes against him. And if they do, they will get removed.
That happens in the pre-match press conference before the Champions League game against Salzburg. And then obviously the next day, the Tuesday, they have the game against Salzburg. What happens in the game and after it?
Well, the game doesn't go Napoli's way. They draw, and they were supposed to win it. It was a pretty poor performance. It was a performance that was very similar to what we've seen from Napoli generally this season, where they play rather well, but they leak goals. They don't look stable defensively. They fail to convert their chances, and they don't look like a team. They look disjointed at times, and it's a disappointing result. The fans are booing, and then you can already see that the conflict that everyone has been smelling is for everyone to see, just by the fact that Ancelotti said he doesn't back that decision, but we have to accept it, meaning that he's taking the players' side about the retiro, and the players are far from happy with this, because they feel that it's unfair. They're being punished. After that game, they rebel. They basically, I think all of the players rebel, saying we're not gonna. Insigne is Lorenzo Insigne, who's the captain of the team and therefore is one of the leaders of that squad. He says that we're not doing this. We're all going home. And Ancelotti's furious. He doesn't speak to any media. He doesn't go to the press conference, the post-match press conference, and it's full-on chaos.
So after the game, Laurinaitis thinks that the players and Ancelotti will go back to the training ground and do their retiro, correct?
Well, he ordered the retiro. He wanted them to continue going to the, he was expecting, the retiro continues until further notice, and no further notice was given. But the players rebelled. They weren't having it.
And Ancelotti, does he go to the training ground?
Yeah, for sure. The retiro is for everyone in the technical staff, from the players to the coaches.
So you have the players go home, in their cars, and Ancelotti goes back to the training ground. So slightly different reactions. The next day, November 6th, what does the club do?
Yeah, so what happens is the club puts out a ridiculous statement, one of the most childish of all the hot-headed things to do. The club, or you can't really say the club, this is De Laurentiis, this is the president of the club talking and saying that they will take legal measures against their players to protect themselves, and that Carlo Ancelotti is the one who ordered the retiro, and that there will be no more, it will be a silenzio stampa, or a press silence until further notice, and it's full-on warfare. It's De Laurentiis, the president of the club, declaring war on everything and everyone, from the coach to the players, and accepting no responsibility for it.
It seems like he's putting most of the blame in that statement on Ancelotti.
For sure. The way he works is that when he decides and says something, everyone has to automatically back it. He doesn't need to convince anyone. He rules by decree. And if anyone in any way, doesn't follow that decree, then they're not doing their jobs. So, like, that is how he rolls.
And then the Thursday, they have a public training with some of the season ticket holders at the ground. What is the fans' reactions to all of this?
Well, they completely lose it. They go in there screaming and shouting and threatening the players and insulting them, calling them mercenaries. With the media reporting that Insigne, obviously being the captain, he's the leaders of that team, so they naturally go after him. They go after Brazilian midfielder Alan, who was rumored to go to PSG in the summer and also in last January, but didn't go because the club didn't want to sell him, and also Callejon, and they threaten them. They threaten their families online. I think Alan's wife even puts out a post on social media saying that someone had broken into their home and gone into their children's rooms and wreaked havoc there and just sabotaged it. So it's full-on warfare. It's a complete mess, except for Ciro Mertens, as they call him, the adopted Napolitano, Dries Mertens, who apologized to the fans for the complete soap opera that's going on.
So you mentioned that Alan's house was broken into. So these threats aren't empty threats, and he's not the only one at the club who kind of has to deal with this. Peter Zielinski as well.
Yeah, a lot of people are. I mean, when this mess breaks out, because, you have to remember that Aurelio De Laurentiis is not really, the fans in Naples are kind of split 50-50 with regards to him as well. But right now, they feel that this mutiny against the club and this public mutiny that they have, their rage goes to them because of the fact that the results haven't been going the way that they were expected to go.
That's on the Friday. And the Saturday, they have a big game against Genoa, and Alan is not even in the squad. What happens in that game?
Well, they failed to win. But I have to say, Napoli played pretty good against Genoa in that game. I watched that game, and they were completely screwed over once again by the referees. They weren't given two clear-cut penalties. But still, they didn't manage. Again, it was a microcosm of the entire season so far. They failed to convert their chances, and they failed to win. And the whistles and jeers at the end of that game was deafening.
And so following that game, we're talking about November 10th, 11th, 12th. What goes on after that?
Well, according to several Italian reports, De Laurentiis goes back to LA because he's, as many people know, he works in the movie business. They basically want to put the lid on. This is the international break. I think they're just going to let things cool down. But things don't cool down because people, the fans, the hothead fans of Napoli, they go run amok pretty much and continue to harass the players and their families, with Zielinski's wife's car being broken into. But whether or not that is related to this or that was just criminality, people just, if that was just a robbery, that remains to be said and confirmed. And, several of the players' wives, they go to either their parents' house or they go into hotels. Some of them leave some leave the country entirely. It's quite the mess, and I think one of the interesting thing is that Lorenzo Insigne is from Naples. His wife is also from Naples, and she goes out and says that I didn't go to my parents because I was scared. I go there because I always visit them, and I'm from Napoli. I'm from Naples, and I'm proud, and all that stuff.
Coming up after the break, we look at how Napoli can get back on track. If you like football content with a great blend of education and banter, and who doesn't, look no further than the Beautiful Game podcast. It's a podcast that doesn't just focus on football results, they have entertaining, topical debates, and look to address social issues like discrimination and inequality, plus much more. They have gained great respect in the football fraternity with their nuanced views and esteemed guests, such as Darren Lewis, Kevin Lisby, Rob Harris, Miguel Delaney, and West Ham United women's footballer Yulia Simic. So if you're looking to be more informed whilst also having a laugh, look no further than the Beautiful Game podcast. Follow them on Twitter at podcast_TBG. On November 12th, the Daily Mail reported that the Al-Thani family from Qatar was interested in buying the club for £480 million. Was that a further sign of the insecurity at the club?
But it's been leading up to this for quite some time. I mean, you have to remember Aurelio De Laurentiis, when he bought Napoli, he bought them for €1 when they were bankrupt and in like the fourth tier of Italian football. He quickly brought them up through the system. He built up a sustainable business model where Napoli was one of the few clubs in Italy that every year made a profit, not inflated, but actually made a profit. And they built on that slowly but surely, and all the way up to where they are now. And the conflict has been that he's not willing to invest more money. He's not willing to take risks to be able to win. He wants to. He is not willing to risk the club's economy. And when the Al-Thani family, who also own PSG, if they were to pay him 560 million euros or 480 million pounds, or how many dollars that is, that's a massive profit for De Laurentiis. But I don't think he's willing to. I don't. This man's ego is so big. If he were to sell Napoli, then he wouldn't be important anymore. He wouldn't matter anymore, and in the news, and he wouldn't be able to steal headlines in the same way, and he wouldn't have power over Italian football the same way he does. So I would be very surprised if that were to happen. Personally, I think that would be the best thing for both Napoli. I think it would be the best thing for the fans, for the club, for the owner himself, because what he's done, he's taken them as far as they can go. The Al-Thani family have the resources and the political power in terms of football politics to be able to launch Napoli as a superpower in the world.
And so let's bring it to this week. What has happened this week in regards to this whole saga?
Well, De Laurentiis has continued. Anyone who was hoping, I said that everyone was hoping that this would cool off and die down. Well, that's not happened because De Laurentiis, via the club, has announced that he might be taking action against the Macedonian international LG Felmas because he spoke to the press when he was with his national team, which is something that you can do. He's trying to suggest that the silence was also, valid when he was away on international duty. We'll see how that goes. There's even rumors saying that the De Laurentiis wants to fine the players half of their wages. And then there's talk of Ancelotti. I think it's pretty clear that Ancelotti will leave after the season at the very latest. However, there's talk that he might be sacked even. It's been a complete mess.
So let's put on De Laurentiis' hat on for a second. Why would he do all of this and create all of this mayhem?
Oh my God! How would I? I don't know what's in this man's mind. It's like, if it defies logic. I mean, I mean, there is a thin line between madness and genius, and I think De Laurentiis is one of those people who has the ability to be both mad and ingenious at the same time. He's crazy.
Talking about an owner who once smashed a reporter's camera and then hopped on a stranger's scooter to flee the scene.
But he's also very successful and good at what he does. Again, it's about leadership style. He is the dictator. He decides everything. He is the sun god. He is the sun king. You know, it's his way or the highway, and that's how he rules by decree. And that's not how it works. You cannot bring in a coach of Ancelotti's pedigree and treat him like that. You just can't. He won't take it. And De Laurentiis has done this before. He did it with Sarri.
Because after the match, we've been hearing that De Laurentiis has made some public comments about why am I spending all this money if I'm getting the same result year after year. Sarri has apparently said he should have made these comments to me and not to the media. So it looks like, at least internally, that there is a little bit of concern with Napoli.
If I'm Sarri, I resign tonight.
He's done it with the previous sporting directors. There is only one boss at Napoli, and that's him. And if anyone doesn't understand that, they will be short-lived. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care who he has to sacrifice to maintain this to maintain this.
It feels like he's an owner from an older generation and that his methods really just don't seem conducive to players of this generation.
Yeah, exactly. He belongs to the generation of the previous generation of Italian owners, like Berlusconi, like the Sensi family, like the Moratti family. The Agnelli family at Juventus are a different animal completely because they're a different breed of cat, because they've always run it like a business. They've always had people running the sporting department and they've not interfered as long as they deliver the results. He's the last old school Italian president.
There are a lot of players with uncertain futures at the club and rumors that some of those players may leave in January. Has that contributed to this as well?
For sure. That's also bad planning on De Laurentiis' part for going into a season with having so many players that are on their last years of contracts. I mean, no matter which club it is, that's just bad planning. That's bad organizing. And that in and of itself creates insecurity. And it hardly helps. So, that has definitely contributed to making this mess much, much bigger and much, much worse than it needed to be. Because this was avoidable. All of this was avoidable. Let's remember that.
And so in regards to, we've talked a lot about leadership. Are there any players that can display some leadership to get them out of this? Are there any leaders in that dressing room?
Well, there should be. I mean, Lorenzo Insigne is from Naples, and he was made the captain. He should be that leader. Now, if he isn't, then why the hell did you appoint him the captain to begin with? This all falls down on De Laurentiis and the sporting management there, the people in charge of running that. So if Lorenzo Insigne is not the character, a person who has a personality that can lead, like Marek Hamšík did for almost a decade, well, whose fault is that? That is also the fault of the management and directors.
So how can Napoli turn it around from here? Where do they go?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Where do they go? I mean, I think that these two games, I think now that they've cooled off a little bit, although you see De Laurentiis saying these things, these guys are now proud and pride. Their professional pride is on the stake. Is at stake here. And I think what will happen now is they will go into these two games against Milan and Liverpool, and they will try to. They have to get a result there. I mean, if they win they need to win these games and to secure a place in the Champions League playoff after Christmas.
So, are you optimistic that they will turn it around?
It all depends. I think the first game against Milan, nothing cools off a situation as much as a win. And if they were to be able to win against Milan and then against Liverpool, then it's smooth sailing again.
You can read Nima Tavalli on sempreinter.com and Goal, and listen to him on the Serie A show. The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. See you next time.